Section 2. Development Review Process. This section provides detailed information about the development review process, descriptions of the 5 major steps of the process, and the people involved in each step. What is the development review process? Overview. The development review process is the entire process applicants go through in order to receive all planning and building permits needed for their project. It is important to know the development review process to better plan ahead, manage expectations, and navigate complex project timelines. This process can vary significantly, depending on the complexity of the project. Complex projects involve multiple city departments or agencies reviewing the application, performing an environmental review, and a public hearing for approvals. Simple projects only require a brief application review, that is, building permit or administrative planning permit plus building permit, with city departments at the one-stop permit center, and do not require the full development review process. Environmental review and public hearing. Steps of the development review process. Pre-application. Meeting and review, optional. Understand what your project needs. This is where a project begins. Plan review and processing. All application materials submitted and city staff reviews. Noticing and decision-making. City staff approves, conditionally approves, or denies an application. Permitting. With planning permits approved, the building permitting process can begin. Construction. With all approved permits, construction phase begins. Development review at a glance. Development review is made up of 5 main steps, as shown here. The length of time and specific requirements of each step varies by project, but all complex project approvals follow this general process. Planning permits approved. After receiving planning approval, applicants will submit construction documents to the city for building permit approval. Step 1. Pre-application meeting. While not required, a pre-application meeting allows you to review the application requirements and preliminary plans with a planner prior to formally submitting your application to understand the city's development standards, requirements, project fees, and the estimated timeline for the entitlement process. What to expect? During this meeting, you will go over your plans, a checklist of the application requirements, the city's development standards and requirements, and any specific issues that should be addressed in the application. Keep in mind, pre-application meetings are helpful for complex projects. Depending on the scope of the project, other city departments also might be involved. This step can be instrumental in identifying and addressing problems early on to save time and money in the long run. Although conceptual plans are acceptable at this stage, the more information you provide, the more city staff will be able to conduct a more thorough review and provide more detailed comments. Key players in Step 1. The applicant works closely with a member, or members, of the planning staff to make sure the application is complete with all required materials before submitting. Learn more about the key players in Section 3. Roles and responsibilities on page 32. Application Requirement Checklist. Required items for the Universal Planning Application. Project Description or Justification. Standard Plan Set. Site Plan. Existing Conditions Plan/Demolition Plan. Building Floor Plans. Building Elevations. Building Sections. Any other items as required by the Planning Department. The application submittal requirements vary from project to project depending on the scope of work, so it is important to confirm the items required for your specific project with a planner prior to submitting an application. Submitting an incomplete application may delay your project. Step 2. Plan review and processing. After the application is formally submitted, planning staff and other city department staff will review the submitted materials to make sure all necessary information is included. Within 30 days of submitting a complete application, planning staff must tell you if your application is complete. If it does, the city will review your project for consistency with plans, policies, and codes. Success of Step 2 depends on how well the applicant works with the city to ensure that the project meets all city requirements and policies and contributes to the health, safety, and welfare of the community. Email your applications to planningdepartment@ci.milpitas.gov or meet with a planner to go over your application materials and make sure that submittal requirements are met. Application fees are due at the time of submittal. After completeness is determined, prepare for multiple rounds of review. It can be a challenge to meet all requirements and address all comments on the first application. The planning department will contact you 30 days after your application was submitted to let you know the planner assigned to your project and if your application is deemed complete or missing any required information. Factor the time it takes to resubmit the application materials and make necessary revisions. For large projects, a study session with decision makers may be recommended to receive feedback for public hearings. The engineering depth will review how the proposed project will impact the city's right-of-way and existing utility infrastructure and prepare conditions of approval for the project. Key players in Step 2. Applicant works with planning staff and is responsible for submitting a complete application and associated fees and addressing all city staff comments. Planning staff helps applicants with project completeness for development review and coordinates with other city departments. Some complex projects may require meetings with THECOMMUNITY, and it is advisable to get community input early to identify potential project delays due to public opposition to the project. City staff technical experts from engineering, building safety and housing, and fire and police assist planning staff in reviewing submitted application materials. This is the longest step of the process. Failing to address all the city's comments will result in additional rounds of review and add significant time to the review process. Project completeness. A term of art and a legal requirement, your application must be complete before it can be evaluated. If information is missing, planning staff will provide a letter with materials you need to submit. Failure to submit the requested materials will prevent your project from being reviewed and deemed complete. CEQA. If your project requires CEQA review, you will be notified at this step by a planner, if not during the pre-application meeting. Step 3. Noticing and decision-making. Project applications must be reviewed by the zoning administrator, planning commission or city council during a public hearing on the project. A public hearing is a formal meeting held to receive testimony from all interested parties on a proposed development project, policy, or action taken by an advisory or a decision-making body. All planning permits require the city to provide public notice to neighboring property owners, giving them an opportunity to provide input before the city decides on a project. What to expect? Once your project is complete and complies with all city requirements, planning staff will first schedule the date for your public hearing and prepare any required mailings, postings, and publications to notice the hearing in accordance with state law. Planning staff will then prepare the required staff report, conditions of approval, and finding of approval. Finally, at the hearing, planning staff will present the project to the hearing body with a staff recommendation and answer any questions related to the project. Keep in mind, projects requiring planning commission approval only require one hearing, but projects requiring city council approval require 2 hearings. While not required, your attendance to the public hearing is strongly encouraged. You will have the opportunity to share the story behind your project and your project objectives. Decision makers will also sometimes direct questions to the applicant. The hearing body may approve with changes, deny, or continue the application. If additional information is needed, or the hearing body needs more time to make a decision, the hearing body may not make a decision and continue the matter for a subsequent hearing. Key players in Step 3. Planning staff prepare the required documents, schedule the hearing date, and present the project to the hearing body. Decision makers will either approve, conditionally approve, or disapprove an application in accordance with the city codes and vision. Decision makers are the city council, zoning administrator, and the planning commission. Conditions of approval. Conditions of approval are requirements placed on a project by the city for projects to conform to state, federal, or local laws. These may include regulations enforced by various agencies and departments. Planning staff will work with internal staff to collect and review draft conditions of approvals, in addition to working with the project applicant to address any concerns and conflicts before finalizing the staff report. Schedule and notice hearings. When a notice of a public hearing is required, the notice must be given at least 10 days before the hearing date. The notice will be published in the city's local newspaper, posted within the project site, and mailed to neighboring residents. Notice may also be given to the Milpitas Unified School District and any other local agencies that provide important facilities and services to the project. CEQA. If a negative declaration or environmental impact report was prepared for the project, a public review period of the environmental document ranging from 30 to 60 days, and a public hearing is required. The Planning Commission and/or City Council will consider the environmental document and review the environmental determination of the project before a final decision on the site development and other applications related to the project is made. If your planning permit is approved, continue to Step 4. You are one step closer. Go to Step 4. Repeat Step 2, not approved. Planning staff will work with you to get the project to a place where decision makers can support it, but if your project is denied, let's try again. Decision appeals. Any person aggrieved by a final decision of a board, commission, or department head, whether the applicant or member of the public, may appeal the decision to the City Council by filing written notice of the appeal with the City Clerk within 12 calendar days of the date of said decision and paying the required fee. The next higher decision-making body will hear your appeal. However, the City Council's decision is final and cannot be appealed. Who decides? Decision maker roles, ruling actions, and meeting information. Step 4. Permitting. Congratulations, your planning permits have been approved. You are not quite done yet. You will need to obtain building permits. The Building Safety and Housing Department issues building permits by reviewing construction plans to make sure the project complies with applicable state and local laws. A review of architectural, structural, plumbing, mechanical, electrical, and life safety systems may be included during this process. At this time, other city departments and outside agencies may need to review the project as well. If applicable, you will need to obtain engineering permits, for example, grading permits and encroachment permits for off-site improvements, and fire permits, for example, fire sprinkler and fire alarm permits, during this step. The process for obtaining engineering and fire permits is similar to the building permit process. What to expect? You will submit construction drawings, application materials, and forms to the permit center and pay for plan check fees. Review time depends on the type of project. If your building permit application is approved, you will pay the required building permit fees, and then your permit will be issued. Keep in mind, if a department does not approve the review, comments will be sent to you and you will have to resubmit construction documents with the corrections for review. Permit review time and fees depend on the project scope. This is when the city collects various development impact fees, for example, public art fee, school impact fee, utility connection fees, etc. Building permit process. Submit building permit application. The permit technician will process the application and let you know your required plan check fees. Pay your fees online or at the permit center. Plan review. Plan reviewers will review your plans and indicate if you need to make any adjustments for building code compliance. Permit approval. Your project coordinator will alert you that your building permits have been approved or need to be resubmitted. Issuance. The permit technician will let you know what your required permit fees and any pending documents required. Pay fees and provide required documentation to be issued your newly approved building permits. Construction and inspection, final approval, and certificate of occupancy. See Step 5. Construction, on the following pages 30-31. Concurrent review. Concurrent review is when planning and building permit applications are processed at the same time at the applicant's own risk, as managing the fees, applications, and timelines can be challenging. Concurrent review can add a significant amount of time and cost to the development review process if any changes to the project are required. Concurrent review is usually pursued by developers and general contractors and is not recommended for residential homeowners. Key players in Step 4. Applicant submits building permit application and pays fees to the permit center. A permit technician at the permit center will review the application for completeness and accepts plan check fees from applicant. A project coordinator will be assigned to your project and will be the main contact for the applicant for the plan review process. Plan reviewers from Building Safety and Housing, Fire, Land Development and Engineering, and Planning review building permit submittal documents and drawings. Jump to Appendix. Pages 66-69 for more detailed information on building permits and applications. Step 5. Construction. At this stage, you have obtained your planning and building permits. You are now entering into the construction and inspection phase of the building permit process with the Milpitas Building Safety and Housing Department. It is now time to begin your construction, schedule inspections, and show up for your inspections. The city will inspect your construction in that you build what was approved and planned. Construction inspections from the city ensures building codes have been met in the field and the site and building are safe for occupancy after construction is completed. The engineering depth also coordinates with inspectors from Public Works to ensure that construction of any required public improvements goes according to plan. Following construction and inspection, inspectors verify that your project has been constructed in compliance with the approved plans and your building permits will be finalized. You will receive your certificate of occupancy and can now enjoy your finished project. Keep in mind for the construction phase. Conditions of approval. You may have some conditions of approval that are relevant to this construction phase. Make sure that you comply with all the conditions noted on your approved permits during construction. Revision application. If there are any changes to your building plan or design after you have received your approved permits, you will need to submit a revision application. This revision could trigger another planning review or building permit review, which will extend the timeline of your project and will require additional review and fees. Pre-construction meeting. For larger developments and commercial projects, a pre-construction meeting will allow the project team to coordinate with the city to understand how the city will work with the project team during construction and give advice on how to make the inspection process before, during, and after project construction go smoothly. Be prepared to discuss the mandatory requirements for the project, including on- and off-site stormwater pollution prevention plan, traffic control, truck access and routes, and any special requirements for the project. For residential projects, a pre-construction meeting is generally not necessary for homeowner applicants and is not required. However, should your general contractor like to discuss necessary details with the city, they have the option to meet for a pre-construction meeting to address any concerns. Public improvements. When public improvements are required as part of the project, you must submit public improvement plans to the engineering department following construction and inspection. The engineering department ensures that all work that will be done within the city's right-of-way meets the city's standards and specifications. Once the plans are approved, the engineering department will issue an encroachment permit that will allow the applicant to begin construction. The engineering department will coordinate with you to obtain as-built of the public improvements for the city's record, which is then taken to the city council for acceptance. Certificate of occupancy. A certificate of occupancy, or sometimes referred to as a C of O, is a confirmation that your project has met all the necessary building codes, inspections, and conditions of approval. Your certificate will include the intended legal use of the project as a retail, commercial, industrial, or mixed-use building. Engineering and fire permits must be approved prior to receiving a certificate of occupancy. This certificate will be mailed to the applicant after the final inspection is passed, and you are now legal to occupy, move into, your newly constructed project.